But the real thing is that Cuba is a completely different country to the Cuba that I experienced in 1993, 1990, 1985. Socially, culturally, the way people think, the way people behave, political relations in the real society. And that side, that part of Cuba, to me, is basically ignored. That is the key question, I think, to understand what is going on in Cuba. The question is not if you agree or disagree with Cuban policies or not. I disagree with Cuban policies many times. The question is, how much do you know about what is really going on in Cuba? Not just in terms of political families, including political families, including new generation of political leaders, including all that, but also including the 11 million Cubans and the 1 million or 2 million Cubans that are living abroad. Reconciliation. If you go to Terminal 2 in Havana, you will see today, not within 5 years, but today, you will see reconciliation going on between Cubans living abroad and Cubans living in the island. When did it start? 20 years ago, 15 years ago. How can we talk about dialogue without ignoring or ignoring the current dialogue between the two sides, Cuba and the United States? There's a dialogue between the two societies, not only between Cubans. A driving force behind U.S. policy are American corporations. And in that picture, the Cuban-American right wing, the Cuban-American lobby, the Democrats, Obama, Bush, we have to put U.S. corporations, Louisiana, Nebraska, Iowa, rice growers, wheat producers, agribusiness people, all of them are Republicans. They are not liberals. They may be not voting for Obama, but they are coming to Havana today, not tomorrow, today and yesterday, because last year they sold food to Cuba under a license, and today, last year, Cuba imported more food from the United States than from any other country in the world. So the embargo is there. But the real movement between the two societies, even between the two economies that are restricted under the embargo regulations, even in those conditions, there are changes. And the potential for those changes will come out as a political reality next year. So, a new president in the United States is going to facilitate something that is already happening. A transition in relations between the two countries that is already happening as long as we have new emerging interests and actors from both sides. Academic exchange, scientific exchange, artistic exchange, cultural actors, religious actors, churches, NGOs. They are talking to each other more than ever before today, not tomorrow.
Thank you.
Can I add just something to what he said? Because we talked about Pepe Hernández earlier, and when I interviewed him for a column, he made that same point, that there is already so much trade going on between the two countries that it was futile for him to continue to support the travel ban. And that was one of the reasons that he gave for his change of heart. Actually.
The other thing on that, regarding the family issue, one of the reasons, and obviously it's not just the Diaz-Balart and the Fidel Castro. I was deeply involved in the whole Elian Gonzalez coverage, and I was, ensnared in that. And again, so I would go and interview the family in Miami, and then go to Gardeners, and it was like, it was just, and how the boy became a sort of an unwilling proxy for both sides. He became a poster boy for both sides. When I interviewed Luis Posada, he starts telling me about his family in Cienfuegos. Did I know them? Because the De La Guardias, we lived down the road. Oh my God, Jesus. The De La Guardias is another charged big family, in which one is in New Orleans, and one was executed, and one was in prison, but is now out. And in the Posada family, he's telling me that that I know his Aunt Conchita because she's the big colonel in Menéndez. And I'm going, oh boy.
You have to tell who Posada is.
Oh, Luis Posada Carriles is probably the #1. Well, he's certainly he's number 1 on Cuba's list of terrorists. And I try always not to make a ruling on that, but I must tell you, having read the entire CIA FBI record and written extensively, my new book has a great deal about this case. He's a man of considerable charm, but it's fairly certain that he blew up a Cubana airline in 1976 and killed, masterminded that, and everybody was killed on that plane. It was a tremendous tragedy. He also, when I interviewed him for the New York Times in 1998, he was, he wanted publicity for having done this bombing campaign because he wanted foreigners and tourists not to go to Cuba, so he's looking for publicity. And one of those events, one of the bombings of a hotel in Havana, and I do believe him that they didn't mean to kill people, because why would you use such a small amount of dynamite, as he pointed out, or C4 plastics? But there was a man who was killed. He was an Italian. For those of you who are news junkies, keep your eyes on this, because there's been a grand jury. All the men involved have received target letters. I've been under subpoena for 2.5 years. And some very interesting developments with Posada are happening in Italy, because the man who was killed was Italian. But he has been very much Fidel Castro's bec noir, and he's been, and he also, interestingly enough, Hugo Chavez has kind of carried the mantle on this, because the airplane left Caracas. So Chavez and Venezuela, there's a lot of activity. I would say it's fairly disgraceful. There was, around 2 months ago, there was an event in Miami. I think they called it the Club Big Five, and it's this watering hole for important, Miami, politicians and the ruling elite, whatever. And he got a big fundraiser, and I was very shocked, because there was people like Uber Matos showed up, and Republic, and it was fairly shocking. They had a fundraiser, and the fact of the matter is they had a fundraiser for a man who has received a target letter that he will be indicted for the bombings in Havana. And I believe, I called Congressman Lincoln Diaz-Balart and Mario Diaz-Balart and Ileana Ross right beforehand, because I heard they were going. And so I called, I said, are you attending the Luis Posada affair tonight? And I don't think, if I hadn't made that call, I think they would have been there. And when I said to Lincoln's assistant, I said, that Luis Posada has received a target letter. Target letter means you will probably be indicted. And now, that's the big question, I know, to people like René. They will not be indicted. Nothing will happen before November because of the election. I think there's an excellent chance that the Bush administration will try to palm it off on the Italians. And the Cubans have been actually moving towards Italy themselves, because Cuba has a lot of influence with Italy, because Italy has a lot of big tourist interest in a place principally Cayo Largo. They own all the 4 hotels there. Italy has significant interest.
We are out of time now. Thank you very much. Thank you, you three. No, please, I have to tell you that this book about Havana, written by my friend Rafael Hernández, is the best book ever written about Havana. And I am serious. And I will tell you more. This book will be published in Sweden, because I want it to be published. Thank you very much for coming here.